I wasn't raised in a Christian home or even a church going family, though it was a good, loving home. But when I became a teenager, I began to ask the big questions in life. Who am I? Why am I here? What's the meaning of my life? And in the search for answers, I began to attend a large church in our local community, looking for answers to these questions. But instead of answers, all I found was a sort of social country club where the dues were $1 a week in the offering plate, and the other high school students who pretended to be such good Christians on Sunday lived for their real God the rest of the week, which was popularity. And this really bothered me because I thought to myself, here I feel so spiritually empty inside, and yet externally, at least, I'm leading a better life than they are, and they claim to be Christians. They're all just a bunch of hypocrites. And so I began to become very angry and bitter toward the institutional church because of the phoniness and the hypocrisy that I saw there. And soon this attitude began to spread toward people in general. Everybody, I said, is a hypocrite. Nobody's really authentic. Everybody's holding up a plastic mask to the world, and the real person is cowering down inside, afraid to come out and be real. And so I began to become very alienated from other people. I said, I don't need other people. I don't want them. I want nothing to do with them. And so I threw myself into my studies, and I shunned relationships with other people. And yet, at the same time, in moments of honesty and introspection, when I looked into my own heart, I knew that deep down inside, I really did want to love and to be loved by others. And I realized in that moment that I was just as much a hypocrite as they were, because here I was pretending not to need people and put on this brave face, when down inside I knew that I really did. And so that anger turned in on myself for my own phoniness and hypocrisy. And I don't know if you understand what this is like, but this kind of inner anger just eats away at your insides day after day, making every day miserable, another day to just get through. And I remember one day I was feeling particularly crummy, and I walked into my high school German class, and I sat down behind a girl who was one of these types that is always so happy, it just makes you sick. And I tapped her on the shoulder, and she turned around, and I said to her, Sandy, what are you always so happy about anyway? And she said, it's because I'm saved. And I said, you're what? And she said, I know Jesus Christ is my personal Savior. And I said, well, I go to church. And she said, that's not enough, Bill. You've got to have him really living in your heart. And I said, well, what would he want to do a thing like that for? And she said, because he loves you, Bill. And that just hit me like a ton of bricks. Here I was so filled with anger and hatred inside, and she said there was someone who really loved me. And who was it but the God of the universe? And that thought just staggered me, to think that the God of the universe could love me, Bill Craig, that worm down there on that speck of dust called planet Earth. I just couldn't take it in. Well, I went home that night and I found a New Testament that had been given to me by the Gideons when they visited our grade school in the 5th grade. And for the first time in my life, I opened it and began to read. And as I read, I was absolutely captivated by the person of Jesus of Nazareth. There was a wisdom about this man's teachings that I had never encountered before. And especially, there was an authenticity about his life that wasn't characteristic of those people in the local church that I was going to who claimed to be his followers. And I realized then I couldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And as I read the New Testament, it became very clear to me what my problem is. My own sin, my moral wrongdoing and failure had alienated me from God, so that I did not experience the relationship with God that I was created to have. It was no wonder that God seemed so unreal and distant to me. But the message of the New Testament was that God had sent his son, Jesus, into the world to bear the penalty for my sin and wrongdoing so that I could be forgiven and cleansed and my relationship with God restored to what it was meant to be. Well, to make a long story short, after about 6 months of the most intense soul searching I've ever been through in my life, I just came to the end of my rope and I cried out to God. And as I cried out the anger and bitterness that was in me, I felt this tremendous infusion of joy, like a balloon being blown up until it was ready to pop. And I remember I rushed out of doors. It was a warm September Midwestern evening. And as I looked up at the sky, I could see the Milky Way from horizon to horizon. And as I looked at the stars, I thought, God, I've come to know God. And that moment just changed my whole life, because I realized during those 6 months of searching that if this message were really the truth, then I could do nothing less with my life than spend it spreading this good news among mankind. And so for me, my conversion experience was simultaneous with my call to Christian ministry.